Hi guys, welcome to a bread making video for you. I'm German and I love my sourdough bread, German sourdough bread. It's really hard to get in different parts of the world, so I decided to bake my own bread. So I've been doing that for the past 10 years almost. It was a bit difficult in the beginning to figure it out, but I think I got a pretty good method to bake consistently good sourdough breads. In Germany we use rye and wheat, kind of a mixed bread, so that's what I'm doing. Today I just want to show you guys how I bake my bread in an easy way without getting your hands all sticky and messy. I hope you enjoy this video. Let me know in the comments. So let's get into it. So I got a couple of different flours. Rye flour here, high grade wheat flour, wholemeal wheat flour, spelt flour here, oat flakes, got linseeds. I got my sourdough starter in an old Gherkins glass jar, some salt, a measuring spoon for spoon and teaspoon, some scales, filtered water, a mixing bowl, very important, a silicone spatula, and for later this will be my form before the bread goes into the oven. Alrighty, so let's get started. The first thing we need to measure out the flour we want to use. Tear it out so we have a zero. Start putting some flour in here. So for my bread I always like to use about a 600 gram of flour in total. Usually I use 300 to 400 gram of high grade flour. Spelt flour. To make a nice fluffy bread you always want to start with a bit of a high grade flour, at least half of the amount of flour you want to use. The other half just mix and match whatever you want. So I'm gonna put in maybe 100 gram of that spelt flour, go up to 400 here, or a little bit more, it doesn't really matter. Now you're gonna use some wholemeal wheat flour as well, bring it up to 500. So we got 300 high grade, 100 spelt, 100 wholemeal wheat flour, up to 500 gram now, and another 100 gram of rye flour. So there we go, it's about 600 gram of flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, I like to add a handful or two of linseed. They're pretty good for digestion and they also make the bread taste nice and nutty. Let's go with 2. And I also quite like pumpkin seeds, so I put in just a handful of those. Whole grain oats, that's quite nice, so a bit of a handful or 2 handful of those. So you got a pretty good mix here. Lots of healthy stuff. I'm gonna make a little mold here in the middle for the water. So the amount of flour was about 600 gram and all the other stuff now together is at a 700 grams. So I'm always aiming to put about half the amount of water, a little bit more than half the amount of water. So, or even 380. Yep, so a little bit more than half the amount of the ingredients goes in as water. And here's my sourdough. So that I took that out of the fridge yesterday, rye-based sourdough. So I put in a few spoons of rye flour and water and let it sort of ferment again overnight, so it's nice and active at the moment. So I just pour pretty much everything of that jar in there. Half of that, 250 milliliter of sourdough, a little bit less. So that goes pretty much all in there, and I just leave a little bit, it's about a spoonful of sourdough stays in there. And that will be my next sourdough starter. So that gets some new rye flour in a moment and some new water, and then it can go in the fridge and I can use it again for my next bread. Sourdough is now in here with the water, so I mix it first up a little bit, so get the sourdough nicely distributed in here with the water. Get all the bacteria that are in that sourdough, all the yeast and lactic acid. Get them nice floating around in here everywhere, sort of, and then I just start mixing up everything a little bit more, get all the flour in here, and that's where that silicone spatula comes in handy, so you don't have to use your hands, you just use that spatula here In the first step now, it's just about combining the flour and the water and the sourdough, so that you don't have big patches of dry flour in there anymore. We just let it rest for 20 minutes or so. It's good if the dough is more moist. If you have the dough too dry, you'll notice right away you can't really stretch this. Just add a little bit more water if it's too dry or too difficult to mix it up. You want to have a dough that's about this consistency. So there we go. So that's enough mixed for now. It's saturated with water, and only after it has all soaked up properly is when you want to knead the dough. So cover that up so it doesn't dry out, and leave it in the shade for about 20 minutes. I've been kneading for about 5 minutes, and the dough is much stretchier already. Starting to come together nicely. No big clumps or anything in there. The bread has been fermenting here for 6 hours or so. They're all risen up here. What I do now is I loosen it up a little bit. Bit of cotton here. Flour on it. That covers the cotton part here, where the dough will go. After I punch down that dough a little bit, it just goes in here now. And then the trick is to fold this bread over a little bit to form a skin on it. Just a couple of times. There we go. Then I just lift that up like so and put it into my proving form here. Cover that up, let it sit here, and now I'm going to preheat the oven. So I've been preheating this is my bread pan. So keep that oven nice and hot. I use a pizza stone on the bottom to have an even heat, and the bread will be right in the middle there. I like to use a round pan like this because that keeps the bread nice in shape. So this is the bread from earlier, yeah, after the second proving. It's risen again a little bit more. So I just drop that into the pan upside down. There we go. Now I'll just slash it. I like to use a serrated bread knife for that. Do one slash like that and a slight angle, so that you get like a nice oven spring. Right in here, bakes for 1 hour. So this is like just a little cover. You can use any cover you like. The first 30 minutes the bread should be covered, so that so it doesn't dry out. So I just put this cover, which is just another baking foam essentially, on top of that one. And that's just so that it keeps the steam in there while it's baking a little bit, and the bread can have a nice oven spring. Otherwise the crust will dry out really quick and it won't come up. So that's how I do it. So now timer set 30 minutes. Go. So half an hour has passed now. I'll take off the lid. And there's a nice oven spring already. I turn this around for even heat. Bang, close again. And now I bake that for another 30 minutes. And there we go. As you can see, it's got a very nice oven spring.
Nice.
It's also nice and light, and when you tap it, it sounds a bit hollow inside. That's kind of what you want. Otherwise it's underdone. I think this is perfectly done now. So let's have a try. So here's the sourdough that I started using for this bread. Here's my rye flour. So all I'll do here is I left about a spoonful in there with that sourdough. I just take a couple spoons of new rye flour. 1, 2. Just so you start filling it up again, maybe a quarter of the jar. Just top it up with some water. Mix it all up. You don't want to have that too wet, but you also don't want to have it too dry. So you want to have like kind of a nice consistency in your sourdough, like a bit like a pudding or something like that. You know, like this kind of consistency here. I find that is the best water and flour ratio for the bacteria to flourish in there. It should be kept in a cool, dark place for a few hours, and after a few hours out at room temperature, I'll put it in the fridge, and then everything will slow down until I use it next time. After those days, I'll just repeat the process. So I hope you enjoyed my sourdough bread making video. So there are actually 3 key points to remember. Number 1, you want to use a silicone spatula to knead your dough to avoid messy, sticky fingers and the mess in your kitchen and everything. So use a silicone spatula and it makes your life so much easier. The second trick that I use is to bake the bread covered for the first half an hour. So the bread is being baked for 60 minutes, and in the first half an hour covered so that the bread can rise while it's baking in the first part, and you get this nice oven spring and your bread will look really nice afterwards. Third trick that I use, well, it's not a trick, but the third thing you got to look out for is that you don't let your bread overproof, meaning you don't let it rise for too long. So every sourdough works a little bit different in all different temperatures, basement, on your kitchen table. So you don't want to let it rise for too long. If it's cold, a good guideline is to let it rise overnight, maybe for 8 hours, bake it in the morning. If it's a warm day in summer, you might only need to let it rise for 4 hours or so. That'll be enough. Just keep an eye on your dough and make sure once it has risen, you put it in the second proving form while the oven is preheating, and then you bake it. Otherwise the bread will be flat and you don't get this nice oven spring. So those are my 3 tips for baking nice sourdough bread, German style. And I hope you enjoyed this video, so please don't forget to like and subscribe. See you guys.